Good evening to all, and welcome to the official companion podcast for HBO's The Last of Us, brought to you by the Chatter After. I'm Brandon, and I'm accompanied by the Chatter After Beyond the Clickers crew, Mike. What's up, Mike?
This episode made me cry 5 times. So I'm okay.
Five times throughout, or 5 times because you watched it 5 times?
Wh-
Or 5 times
wh-
per watch?
Five
Because
times per watch. We'll just leave it at that.
there's a sixth cry there. And a Ron Swanson giggle when eating the strawberries. And we're accompanied by special guest Destiny. Welcome. How you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for letting me come and speak on your podcast about this wonderful show, this delightful show. I too
Yes.
cried. I could not
Yes.
count the tears, but the tears were a flowing.
Yes. Yes. Guys, welcome to Beyond the Clickers, where we chat and argue and seek the art beyond the clickers on HBO's The Last of Us. A phenomenal series based on the hit game by PlayStation Studios and Naughty Dog. So I'm excited to talk about this. This show has been amazing, life changing, world altering, and so many things. And as usual, we got 3 sections of the show, guys. We're going to go ahead and talk about relevant news that have come out in the last week as The Last of Us keeps spreading through the world just like the fungus and and capturing the minds of audiences, big and small, hopefully not too small. Then we're going to jump into the episode and break it down, talk about the things that make the episode amazing, brilliant, but more importantly, things that, of course, were birthed as episode and show only. And then at the end, because we will never forget about our fellow gamers out there, we're going to break down all those Easter eggs and nuances that wink at the audience for those gamers and say hi to the source material, the game. So let's start with a couple of news things that we got going on. And the first one, it's not a happy one. It's real world sadness. Because a little bit after the premiere of episode 3, I would say this was announced Monday, I believe it was. It was Monday or late Sunday, I think it was.
Around that time, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was
We
Sunday. Sunday. It was Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, we received the very heartbreaking news that the great Anna Wershing, which phenomenal actress in multiple projects, but to us as relevant to the show, is the actress that brought Tess to life in the original PS3 game, remastered, and The Last of Us Part 1 with her phenomenal performance and motion capture. But this phenomenal actress passed away at the age of 45 as she was battling cancer. And we all felt it, not only because I've recognized her for so many great projects that I've seen before, but it was a person that lived for the art and it shows. I think she leaves behind 2 boys and a lot of friends in the celebrity realm are working together to make sure that they're taken care of, because this was a person that was very loved apparently by fans, but in the world, but also by people that she worked with. So, do you guys remember any other projects you guys know her from? Did you enjoy her work from?
Yeah, I believe she was in the Runaways, the Marvel show on Freeform.
Yes, yes, she
She
was.
was
She was
she
one of
was
the
a character
parents.
there. Yeah, she was one of the parents there, and
Yeah,
she's a great character actor. I've seen her in a lot of different projects. So this is
yeah,
devastating news, of course. And
yeah.
I've got her GoFundMe page in the description, and I'm putting it in the chat here now for everyone if they'd like to donate to support the family.
Yes. We will miss this amazing actress, and her art lives on forever. Destiny, do you remember Anna Wershing for any other work?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I remember her showing up in Vampire Diaries. So as you know, I'm 29, almost 30 now. So like I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, I think I saw her like on my teenage cheese at the time.
Yeah.
Um but I mean, she's been around just like you guys have said for so long. She definitely has a storied career. So I know I've watched other things. Like I know She had a couple episodes in Star Trek, Picard, and
Yeah, she was the Borg queen of all
so
characters, which is crazy.
um, yeah, and so like just having to watch all this TV and stuff for my job, and it's just like I've seen her here and there, and I mean she always gives a good performance in her roles and stuff like that. It's a shame she never got to really lead her own complete series, but it's good to see that she had like a rich career, and I mean that's all you can ever really ask for in the entertainment business. So yeah, she had a I hope what people take away from this is that she had like a good rich life, and she clearly was happy with what she did, and she was working allegedly I think up until the time that she kind of was super sick and she had to like take some time off, but she seemed to have a good time until she passed away, so that's at least there's some comfort in that.
Yeah. Our thoughts go. The shadow after says our thoughts go to her family and her loved ones that are left behind, and we love you, Anne. Um, Another interesting piece of news that came up was, and it's funny because Brett and I, before Michael was able to escape the quarantine zone last episode, um, one of the things that we talked was that um, it is this show was getting so much acclaim, so much more viewership with every single episode, that we said, what if this is one of those shows that is so amazing and it's blowing up so much that what if it gets renewed before it's done? And I don't know if we've spoken into existence, but guys, we need to celebrate. PlayStation is having a hell of a day, a hell of a week, because The Last of Us has been renewed for season 2. And there's a lot of things that come with it. To read and I want to talk about this piece of news with you guys because I think this is a great piece of news for us TLOU fans. And to read a little bit of an excerpt from the Variety article where this was announced and shared. The move to renew the series comes as little surprise as it has been a hit with both critics and audiences. In addition to strong reviews to the tune of a 97% critical approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, it started at 100, and in 3 weeks it's still at 97. Episode 2 reached 5.7 million viewers across HBO and HBO Max in the US this past Sunday. That represents a 22% jump over the 4.7 million who turned into the first episode, marking the largest week 2 audience growth for any HBO drama series in the history of the network. That is like ridiculous. That's when I read that,
That's a lot.
Like, yes. No, and the biggest thing is not that it's a lot. In the history of HBO, no other show has had an audience jump of percentage that high. That's like, so in other words, it's unheard of.
Yeah. That's just the benefit of weekly releases, right?
I think so, definitely. And like just the testament to good television, but definitely the weekly release formula is a banger. I was looking up the population in Los Angeles just to see, like, just to put that in perspective. So Los Angeles, considered a very highly dense, compact city, is 3.8 million people, and that's still not even enough people, right?
Yeah, because people are rewatching it then, right? Like, it's not just the first watch. People are rewatching it probably because of how much you're enjoying it.
And Boston's population is so tiny, it doesn't even make sense for me to mention it. But, 600,000 people live in Boston, which is so tiny. And still, those two combined still don't equal the amount of viewers that are watching The Last of Us. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just, on the comment section, we have G-Techie. We already knew that was going to happen. Not a surprise that season 2 is a greenlit. You're right. You're 100% right. Now, Now, the one thing that I love with this announcement is that if you guys go back, I don't remember the exact quote, so that's on me. But if I find it, I'll put it in the description below. But in an interview, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann were asked about the possibility of having more seasons because we know that The Last of Us has two full games. Of course, you have the DLC Left Behind of Part One, but we know that's part of that Part One storyline and game, right? So it has Part One and one of the interesting things that Craig Mazin mentioned that I think it's something for us to think about as we see the season one progress and as we get ready to wait for the future season is that he plans to only cover the games. He, as we've
Mhm.
seen in the show, even though he has expanded and he has explored other territories or other points in the game that are not as expanded in the gameplay moments, right? Like episode 3, for example, is a big expansion or a different retelling of that Bill's Town sequence, right? But it is still following the beats of the game. It's really following that sequence. It's not changing the course of the story. It's just adding a couple of things to enrich it and make it more fitting um, for television, right? So the first is that he wasn't going to do anything beyond the storyline of the games. Now, one of the things that he did say also was that season one, of course, is going to cover the entirety of part one, but then season two is and onward is going to cover part two of the game. But all the story that occurs in part two is so much that he can definitely split that into multiple seasons. And for those that have played part two, no spoilers for show only people, there's a lot of changing of paths in part two that you can definitely see three seasons coming out of that one game. You can definitely make that work because the expansion within the world of the game would be so interesting to see in film. So we can definitely see 3, 4, 5 seasons of The Last of Us just with those two main games and not adding another one. But of course, as as we go into that, we also have to talk about the position of Neil Druckmann because you know that one of the things, and Mike, as gamers, Destiny, I don't know if you've ever played the game or if you're a gamer yourself. Hey,
I have,
um,
yeah. Yeah.
good,
I'm a
good,
gamer. I played the games. I played the DLC. I played two. Like, I'm good. I'm good.
awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Emotional damage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And for some reason, I just keep coming back for more. Um, as we talk about season two, we talk about renewal, we talk about how we're going to cover the rest of the games. It also makes us revisit the conversation that a lot of the fandom has with
Mm.
Naughty Dog and PlayStation is: are we getting a part three? Are we getting more of The Last of Us? And I do find it very interesting and provoking and final. I think those are the three words I want to use: interesting, provoking, and final. The fact that Neil Druckmann has actually, as co-president of Naughty Dog, right? He has announced his official stance on this. And he gives us the example not only of The Last of Us, but of Uncharted. Like he talks about how with Uncharted 4, which is another great property of Naughty Dog, he's announced that that story is done. He is done with the story of Nathan Drake. He's done with Uncharted. We do know that we got Lost Legacy, which gave us a bit more of a story with other characters in the Uncharted franchise. But the satisfaction that the team felt in Naughty Dog with Uncharted allows him to say that that story is done. In the words of Neil Druckmann, he says, Uncharted was insanely successful. Uncharted 4 was one of our best selling games, and we're able to put our final brushstroke on that story and say that we're done. So he officially says that there will be no Uncharted. And as a response to that, he says, with The Last of Us, unless a very interesting and compelling story that allows them to explore the themes of that world comes in, they're officially done. So there is that possibility that part two is the end. And personally, those that know the ending of that game, I am 100% okay with that because of the themes that it tackles, especially when you think about how a lot of people were in uproar when Last of Us Part 2 was announced, because a lot of people would say that Last of Us Part 1 was perfect just the way it is. So I like the idea that there's this healthy trepidation, right? To consider whether or not to make more. And I also like I like the restraint from both parties. And what I mean by that is by restraint from Neil Druckmann's side and restraint from Craig Mason's side, because Craig Mason doesn't want to do anything beyond the game content, and Neil Druckmann doesn't want to do more of content unless they find something that's worthy of secession. So, what do you guys think? Are we okay with just getting another couple of seasons of The Last of Us to cover part two? Do you guys want more Last of Us? My position is I am perfectly happy with what I have. If I get more, I'm just going to hope that it's more that I'll love and find controversial and interesting. What do you think, Destiny? Should we get more beyond what's already done?
I'm so conflicted about this because I do want another Last of Us. I do. But then it's like, if you really think about how it ended, what else can you do with that story? Truly, like, spoilers for people who, I guess, who haven't played the game. I apologize. But like, Ellie walks away and she walks, into the forest, into the unknown, right? And what's the next story for her to tell? Would we follow Abby and Lev into Santa Barbara? Would we follow Ellie as she tries to make amends with Dina and Tommy? What do we do? So that's the case. So like, I do want to see Ellie eventually being happy, because I mean it the little banner it ends so bad for her. She can't play guitar anymore. She got she lost her fingers or whatever. So I do want to see that story redeemed, but also at the same time, it is kind of perfect in that messy way, just like how the first one ended in a perfectly messy way. So it is symbolic and honestly doesn't need to go any further. Not really. It doesn't. You can just make up your own little thing, but you want to live in that world, right? You want to still I can be back here again. But
and it's one of those.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
One last thing I wanted to add is, if it's something that I thought about was like, wouldn't it be cool to see like something with Joel and Tommy being fireflies or something for a little bit? Like if they did some kind of DLC where they could kind of show what happened exactly with them after
like a prequel,
after everything happened. Yeah, then that bring back Joel or whatever. But anyway,
right. Yeah, and that's the guy. Go ahead, Mike. Same question, of course.
I was just gonna say Troy Baker definitely needs more work, so let's get the man another Joel story.
It's funny because every time he talks about Pedro Pascal's performance, he's a mixture of charmed, amazed, and angry at the same time.
Yeah. I just want to back up right quick and just mourn the loss of my boy Nathan Drake over here. A Thief's End. It really came to an end, and I'm sad about that. But regarding The Last of Us, sure. Like you guys have been saying, I don't know where you go from here at this point. But that's how I felt after the first game, right? Like I didn't want a sequel to The Last of Us, and we got it, and it was an incredible story. Regardless of how you feel about it, that was definitely a story they felt was worth telling, and they put their heart and soul into that game. I don't, again, same thing. If the right story comes, great. But right now, I just don't see it. I just think they're probably going to just focus on adapting it for HBO. And then after this multiplayer game, whatever that's another thing. We have a Last of Us game coming out that we don't know anything about. What does the multiplayer game look like? What characters is that going to be following? You might start spinning off and following different characters outside of Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, and now that you think about it, now I can see that art that they released. It's like a cruise ship that you see in that little I forget why words failing me, whatever that art demo thing was. And that was interesting. Yeah, that was interesting because it's like, ooh, we have to investigate that cruise ship. That's going to be so scary.
No, and it's a co-op thing, right? So it's about surviving. And it all comes down, like you said, it's all about the story, right? it's all about story always, and I love how that's always been at the forefront of this studio, of this game, of their intentions, right? And the other thing that I find very interesting is that we love being in that world, right? But
Kind
it
of.
but but we love being in that world because there's something there that draws us, right? And that is the characters. Is like, if we have a story for these characters, if we have a direction to be able to take them, and I think that's what makes it so hard to decide what we want, right? Because we feel that we followed these characters to the end of the road, even though they're still alive where we left them, right? So, like, how do you go on from here? Because it's very interesting how, like you said, Destiny, it's a happy and messy ending. Not a happy, but it's a perfect messy ending on both ends
Yeah.
because of how you feel after you're done, right?
This is very interesting, G Techie.
So G Techie puts in the chat, part three should have Abby and Ellie team up on the Firefly Island to actually try to extract a vaccine so Ellie's life matter again.
Um,
Damn.
I
Damn.
I would say, yeah, that was one of the.
That's
Do I want to
so
use the word
interesting.
mistake? Like, I don't think I want to use the word mistake, but that is definitely one of
Oh
the
wait,
things that the
I
second
think I
one.
think we need to kind of hold off a little bit
Oh,
because if because remember, part one is being showed every week.
all right, all right.
So we kind of we gotta.
That's what the ticker's for.
I know.
That's okay. I get it. I get
Fair,
it.
fair
One of the
enough.
things I
Fair
do,
enough. I
one of
like
the
the
things I
idea
do want
though.
to.
Keep going, Destiny. Keep going.
Well, no. One of the things I do want to touch on about the renewal talk that we just had, my
Mhm.
initial reaction wasn't even excitement, because I mean, obviously I felt like, okay, that's obvious, they're going to renew it, right? But what it was I was kind of worried because I felt like they should have saved that until the last episode. I felt like they could have waited until the season was over and then announced that the second season was coming, but maybe they wanted to save Craig and Neil from getting asked that question 2 billion times, because they kept getting asked, is going to get renewed or blah, blah, blah. But I think what it causes is people spoiling the second game, right? And then are people like talking about it on the timeline, which I have seen, and I have seen some non-gamers, explain that, oh no, now I've been spoiled, because they don't play the game and they don't care. They're not looking up spoilers. But I have seen some
Mhm.
people who have been like, I wish, I wish I wouldn't have seen this or whatever. So I was like, yeah, I think they could have held off on that. I think they could have held off on the announcement
It's
for a little
interesting that you
bit.
say that because I think that you're right, and but there's also another side to it, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Mm-hmm.
like most people nowadays, right? Nobody has time to watch a million shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have that one? You have that type of viewer, especially non-gamers, right? That wants to be able to feel that they can invest their time into something. So
Mm-hmm.
that's all. So it kind of also works as a way of telling you, hey, there's more coming. So feel
Mm-hmm.
free to just throw your time into this. We're not
Yeah.
just gonna fit. We're not just gonna leave you hanging. We're
Yeah.
gonna finish the story and keep it going. So I agree with what you're
Very true.
saying, but you have those two sides of it, and
Yeah.
and I think also with that, because you got to think about this also. Forget about House of the Dragon, which is of course is huge, right? And we talked about, and we're going to talk about the next piece of news about episode 3 and how the audience for this show continues to grow even more, right? Because it went up another 37. It went up to 37% because it's just ridiculous, right? The way it's going up, but
Mm.
you got to figure HBO Max has been has been around for what, 2.5 years now, 2.5 3 years now, something like
Roughly,
that,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
beyond House of the Dragon, have we heard HBO Max being blown up by a show before The Last of Us? Like, it's been blowing up with a lot of original content, but like this is putting HBO on the map in a way that it hasn't been in a long time. So as a
Yeah.
studio, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm gonna use this to market my brand as much as possible. So it's about also bringing new viewers in and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, the premiere, we were saying that it had the biggest season debut or series debut in like a decade, right? So like
Steve
that
Buscemi numbers.
Buscemi numbers, yes, that one's for you, Brett. But yeah, it's capturing a new audience compared to some of the other content on HBO, which is very fascinating. Like it just keeps climbing each episode higher and higher and higher, which usually I don't know if it's gonna even have a decline at this point. Like it might just keep going up 10% every episode until the finale, because that's how impactful the story is. And I just love how most people, this episode had a few more haters than the other two, but I just love that the audience is responding to it well. And that kind of leads back to what Gteki was saying earlier. Do you think the HBO series influences Naughty Dog's decision to make part three?
It's very possible. I would even say if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't push them to look for that story, right? If it doesn't push them to look for that story, it'll probably push them to make The Last of Us available in even more places, right? Because of course they're making the move now to make The Last of Us available on PC, right? So maybe this is the push to allow part 2 to be on PC, right? And stuff like that. So either or, it's going to push Naughty Dog to do a lot of things. So I'm not surprised. That's a very interesting point of view, Detective. That actually makes a lot of sense. Um, but as we keep on going, we're almost done with the news and going to the episode. We haven't forgotten the episode. We're here to talk about an episode, damn it. But there was a lot of great news. um, the Last of Us viewership continues to rise. Guys, look at this little piece of information. Um, episode 3 of The Last of Us, the one that we're covering today, long time, brought in 6.4 million viewers alone during its premiere. This is not during the week, at 9 o'clock on Sunday. No, even people that cut the cord got online at 9 o'clock and watched it during its premiere on Sunday night. The total is an increase of 12% compared to episode 2, which in turn saw a 37% jump when compared to episode 1. Basically, more viewers are watching The Last of Us on a weekly basis with each new episode that arrives. Additionally, when accounting for views via other platforms, The Last of Us is now bringing an average of audience of over 21 million. And of course, when they mention other platforms, they're talking about platforms like Sky Atlantic that's across overseas, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, I don't know, it's ridiculous. It's it's like Brett would say to make him very proud. Is the running up the hill effect. Just like running up the hill, that song blew up and The Last of Us have blown up. Running Up the Hill blew up with Stranger Things season 4. The song Long Time by Linda Ronstadt is blew up on Spotify.
Blued up.
Yo,
Yeah.
on Sunday, January 29th, between 11 p.m. and midnight. So a lot of people didn't sleep, they just cried. Um, per Spotify, on Sunday, January 29th, between 11 p.m. and midnight Eastern, there was a more than 4,900% increase in U.S. streams of Long Time by Linda Ronstadt. That's a dangerous.
In
That's
an hour, though.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
They cried themselves to sleep with this one. That's what I think
yes. They
happened.
did.
I think
Yes, they
so.
did.
I think so.
And with the tears, right? Titeki, so did I. So did I. Um,
Pain.
I don't know if Linda Ronstadt is still with us, but them royalty checks, bruv. Them royalty checks, bruv.
They coming
Um,
in. Yeah, she's
yeah,
still alive. She's still alive. She has some medical issues right now, but she's still alive. So good for
nice.
her. I
Good
would
for
love
her.
to hear if she releases a statement or two, like maybe in the coming days or something like that, but we'll see.
Maybe she reveals who the song was about and it changes the world. Um, so that's it for the news, guys. Let's do what we came here for to do. Let's talk about episode 3 of The Last of Us on HBO and seek the art beyond the clickers. So First impressions. Destiny, you're the guest, so we got to throw it. We got to throw it to you first.
Phew.
When you first saw when you first
Mhm.
saw the episode, yeah, what were your thoughts, impressions?
I mean, 10 out of 10, no notes. I absolutely love being a game. So as a gamer, I mean, we know how the story plays out, and I'm sure we're going to get into that a little later, so I don't want to jump too far ahead here. But seeing the way that they drastically expanded Bill and Frank's story and added heart and humor and then like heart wrenching what is it catastrophic storytelling and all in one episode and all in one 75-minute episode. It's insane that we were able to see
Mini
an
movie.
entire life, yeah, mini movie. And then if you really think about it, it wasn't even really truly 75 minutes because we get that whatever 15, 20 minutes of Joel and Ellie at the beginning. So like he even had like maybe 45 minutes to tell this love story and to kill us all. And they did it. They did it successfully. So that's my take until we get into the
Beautiful.
minutia. But yeah, I mean, a phenomenal, beautiful best episode of television I've seen in a hell of a long time.
Right.
So,
Mr. Thomas.
Yeah. This is the best bottle episode ever made, because like Destiny was saying, the bulk of the episode, we're just following these two characters who we haven't even met before up to this point, right? We've been following Joel, Tess, Ellie. And so to throw us in, like you were saying, we know Bill. We've heard of Frank from the games. And so watching it, and Brandon was even texting me as he was watching it because we just assumed that they were setting us up for heartache, right? Because we know what these two go through in the video game and how that relationship ends. And to not do that and to turn it on its head makes it hurt even more at times because it's instead of it being a normal, breakup tragedy, you do up. And it's like, oh, so I'm gonna bawl my eyes out instead. You just
Okay, I'm
inserted,
done. I'm walking away. You just
yeah.
made the greatest comparison in the world. I need to walk out. Where's that meme of Sponge? Where's that SpongeBob meme? I'm gonna head out.
all right, I'm out.
I'm out. I'm
Yeah,
out.
but it's like you basically took that scene, the opening sequence from Up, and made it the entire episode. And I will forever hate you, Neil Druckmann, Craig Mazin, for that
No, you can hit
because
Craig. You can hurt Craig the most. He's the one that wrote it.
okay,
Yeah.
see,
Craig,
okay. Well,
we
Neil
hate.
still did part two, and the next few episodes.
So we
So
can hate them both. Okay, fine.
yes, equal punishment. But yeah, I just think it's a perfect love story, and
Yeah.
the way that they were able to capture that in that small amount of time
Yeah.
and make it work. They made us fall in love with these characters. When Joel just needs a freaking battery. That's the entire point of the episode. Is Joel needs his battery. And instead it's like, yeah, but we're gonna check in on Ron Swanson during the apocalypse and have the greatest love story ever told. That's what we're gonna do.
They expanded what it was essentially a note
Yeah.
into a whole hour of a whole hour
Wait, is this
hour
the
and some
Notebook?
change into
No.
television. Yeah, exactly. This is the Notebook, okay?
Kind of is. That's the worst part. It kind of is.
Um. So I think the best way to begin the conversation. I think not that we're going to talk about all the video game Easter eggs here right now, but I think the best way to start the conversation of this episode, right, is to let's do a quick recap or synopsis of what happens in the game, because by getting that out of the way, we can then enjoy what the show is giving us, right? So in the game, you arrive to the town of Lincoln, which is this town that has been boarded up, fenced up by Bill, who is literally a hermit that does not like people. Period. Very similar to Bill in the movie in the show, and he's there to try and get a vehicle to be able to keep going his journey with Ellie. He encounters infected. He goes with Bill. He tries to find the battery. Bill says the famous lines: "A partner is only good for one thing: getting you killed." And he talks about how he had a partner, and he talks about how the best thing that could happen is that he doesn't have that partner anymore. right? And suddenly, after an event with infected, which I'm not going to go into detail, they are able to find the battery, they find the truck, but we find Frank, who had recently gotten himself bit and hung himself to not become an infected. And that's the first time we meet him. Joel's never met him before. So Joel never met Frank before. Joel knew Bill. There was a pre existing relationship there. And Bill, you can see the heartbreak in his face in the game after he finds out what happened to Frank. And if you follow your kleptomaniac tendencies that the gameplay requires you in the game, you're able to find a suicide note for Frank where he writes down how much he hated Bill and hated his tendencies and how he just wanted to live alone and not bother with anybody. And Bill and Joel end up in the most horrible terms ever, but Joel is able to find his battery and his truck and escape. That's what the game does. It's a transition, right? It's just there to see a different kind of person that exists. It alludes to the idea of Bill having a partner. It alludes to an idea that Frank was that person. And with those grains of information, Craig Mazin tailors a phenomenal story of love. And this is why this is my favorite episode so far, because it does so many things that I wasn't expecting it to do. And it never stops surprising me in how much The Last of Us it still is. In no way, shape, or form does it feel like it doesn't belong, right? And and it's funny because if you guys listen to the behind the scenes or into the episode that they do in HBO right after every episode, one of the things that Neil Druckmann talks about is about the idea that whenever they come to a decision in a sequence of the show, is they either see if it's bad, if they're bad, if it's really bad, they stay with the game. But if it's better, they choose to deviate. And this was so good that they deviated. And I'm totally happy and thankful that they did. So we know what happened in the game. Now comes the story of love of Bill and Frank. So let's just cross the boxes here of the things that happened before so we can take our time with Bill and Frank and then close the episode. Um, the episode starts with something that's also show only, is that Joel does a symbolic grave monument for Tess. Like, what a very somber way to start an episode, right? Like in the previous episode that ends with Joel just walking away and leaving Ellie in the dust at the end of that explosion, right? It literally picks off on the sorrow that we were left with. Like how interesting that they knew that we would be brokenhearted by the end of episode 2, that they were able to capture our attention at the beginning of episode 3 with that same emotion. Like I found that so interesting. How did you guys find that? The fact that that first shot is that.
Mike, you want to go first?
It's needed, right? These are the moments where a video game can't really do that, right? Because you always have to be moving to the next thing. You have to keep the player engaged and interested. That's why you also notice so far there's not many action sequences in this show because that's not really necessary to make a good episode of television. Whereas a video game,
Right.
Joel needs to constantly be doing something to push the narrative forward so the player can stay engaged. So I think having those quieter moments are very important. And it just makes that loss hit even harder, right? Because we know how much Joel has lost up until this point. And having him just take a moment regarding Tess allows us to process it, but it also just shows how Joel and Ellie are reacting to what just happened, because that was very shocking and sudden and a very big deal because Tess in episode 2 was very much the leader of that group, and now she's gone. And what does Joel do? Does he go back home? Because he's wanted to go back home the entire time. And so
Yeah.
I love how they acknowledge all of those things in such a simple manner.
That's
I sitting in hearing you guys talk about the somberness, the sorrow, I actually didn't view it that way. I viewed it as a peaceful. I mean, obviously he's sad, but I connect the beginning shot with the ending shot of this episode, which is the window frame, which I'm sure we'll get into as well. But I saw it as like a spiritual thing, and I don't know why. Like, I'm not religious, like at all.
yeah.
Like I grew up in a Christian, uh, going to Christian church. But anyway, I'm like not a religious person. But for whatever reason, like I was like, oh my gosh, Joel. Like to me, it was like kind of like a serene, peaceful moment. Like Joel's kind of like, I'm making this little stone river marker. One, it's shot beautifully. Two, something about the river is just really calming, right? And then he's
Yeah.
kind of just piling up these stones. So to me, I was like, he's in mourning, but like it's not like a heavy. It's not like a, it's not like a, I don't know, a visceral thing for him. Like
Right.
he's kind of just like, it's like a peaceful, like I'm putting this to pasture, like I'm paying my respects, but like, okay, I gotta move on now, like, right, like the river always flows, right? What does Pocahontas say, right? About the river, right? She can go steady or
Yeah.
or whatever, the
If my
crazy path or
if
whatever.
my girlfriend hears that you're talking about Pocahontas, she's gonna come out of nowhere and just start singing The
Just like,
Colors of the Wind.
what I love most about rivers is, right, um
Just
so
around the river bend.
yeah,
There you go.
exactly, just around the room, right? So I found it peaceful and spiritual in that way. And then
Yeah.
when it came to the last frame, I don't want to give too much away, but I also felt that same spirit.
Yeah,
It
it has the
felt like
same
they were
kind of
connected. It's like a
reflective, right?
serene, reflective, yeah,
Yeah.
peaceful
Yeah.
feeling.
So it's something that's very interesting also is that a note from the HBO podcast where they talk to the creators about everything that's going on is that they keep talking about Joel's role as a protector. And one of the things that I found very interesting, I just thought about it now because I'm looking at the shot in my mind that we're talking about it, is that there's this very specific shot as he's finishing building that monument, right? Where you see a shot at Joel's hand as he puts it in the water. And it kind of zooms in on the wounded hand, which, if you remember what those wounds are from, is when he jumped at the guard and protected Ellie. So it's kind of like it's a way of showing how broken Joel feels because of this loss, because he is a protector. And we're going to see it as we move forward in terms of his relationship with Bill and the comparisons there, right? Is that he is a protector and he's building this monument for someone that he failed to protect. And it's a very interesting imagery that I love how they are building. Those that know the story of The Last of Us, I love how they're building that emotion slowly but surely up to the climax that we know will come, right? Because the idea, also the motto, "Save who you can save," right? The idea of
Mm-hmm.
protecting, how those things are building. All it's like all roads lead to, and like we're literally seeing all the little bits here and there that build that story. And I don't know, I love how every scene is purposeful. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Even something as simple as the whole backstory, how the Bill storyline starts, right? With Joel explaining to Ellie about Fedra and what
Yeah.
Fedra did to all the people in Lincoln, which they did in many places. Like, if they're dead, they can't get infected. What a cruel way of to think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't you? I mean, if the people of Paratus in Attack on Titan can build walls within walls within walls, there is no way they couldn't just build an additional wall to fit more people. You know what I mean? Like, you can build a wall, like, But the
Right.
idea that that was the only choice, it's astonishing, and it's cruel, and it shows how horrible government's all Nazis. No,
Yeah,
uh,
now, right?
yeah, right.
They weren't
But not
then.
then. But not then. So many good lines. Murray
I love these
Bartlett
two.
and I was gonna call him Ron Swanson. Damn it, Mike.
Nick Offerman.
Murray Bartlett, and and Nick
Nick
Offerman were
Offerman.
so phenomenal.
The
And
Office is really throwing you off, isn't it?
stop, pause. It's but so many great lines. But I think we need to jump in right. Everything else is just Easter eggs and interesting conversation. But let's jump into the episode. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frank Bill is the same Bill from the game, right? Close horse. I love the idea that they build him as a doomsday prepper. Even Joel throws the line, "Were you a prepper?" like, like I love that. Him in this little like hub. Um, Not today, you're neo-Nazi jackboot fucks. So good. Um,
The line delivery for that one is amazing.
yes, yes, yes. So for a man of few words, right? Because that's Bill,
Mhm.
the man of few words. Um,
Mhm.
am I the only one that wants to go to Bill's house and have him cook dinner for me?
Oh
Because
my god,
man,
that meal looked so
yo,
delicious. I was
yo,
reading production notes. I thought it was chicken, but it's actually rabbit. Did you guys know it was rabbit? I've never had rabbit. So I mean, I'd be up
That's what
for
happened
it.
to the rabbit.
that's funny. Tricks are for kids. So when we meet Bill, we meet Bill, and then he's having the time of his life. He's happy. I mean, he's in control, right? Because that's the point. Bill has to
Yeah.
be in control, right? It's the same Bill from the game, but of course with a lot more layers, a lot more complexity, which is the complexity is what makes him feel human and like a real person in the show, right? Um, and then he meets Frank, or in other words, he finds Frank.
In a hole.
That for that
Frank
first
fell in his
encounter,
hole.
yes, the first encounter, thoughts, Destiny.
I love the first encounter. They have like this really cute tete-a-tete, this
Yeah.
really cute verbal sassy argument. And I mean, who wouldn't fall for Murray Bartlett's, scraggly beard and blue eyes? So I love that for them. I love that
No, and just looking at
encounter.
him and go like, I'm a horrible liar. You know
Yeah,
that already. Like I'm not like,
I
like I'm
don't
not.
know.
The
I felt
entire
like
interaction is
I was
like,
gonna tell a lie. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah.
no, it's just like the entire interaction is so funny. Like, why did you pause? I don't know. I thought about lying, but I don't understand why. It's just it's the humor
It's
was on point with those two. You can like it's
Yeah.
instant chemistry, and I think that's what makes it so easy
Yep.
to get attached to these two because the actors are phenomenal, but then the chemistry between them is so great.
mhm.
Like, if I invite you in, all your friends are going to show up. This is not you're not going to get free food. This isn't Arby's. Arby's doesn't have free food. It's a restaurant. And it's just
Right.
like the dumbfounded look on Bill's
Yes.
face, just like,
No, the
okay.
idea, and I think I find it funny because the idea is like Bill goes like, you know what an Arby's is? Like
Yeah,
because you gotta figure he's thinking because one of the things that he's conscious about is how old he is. He's very conscious about who he is and his age also, which I love how those are the kind of nuances in the presentation and the performance that you see, right? Like that moment right there shows how conscious he is of who he is, especially when he meets Frank, right? And one of the things that I found very interesting about that dialogue, um, that's kind of like thrown in there, is that he comes from a QZ, and that
Same.
Sando advisor why is Arby's like doesn't exist anymore or
maybe they gave up
mean,
Arby's for Lent.
who's working at Arby's, Brandon? There's and the infected love Arby's.
I no
We're just
I don't
gonna
understand.
keep memeing on them, guys. It's
Wow.
okay.
Okay,
keep memeing on him.
keep doing it.
Keep
I'm
memeing
gonna
on
head out.
him.
So the idea that Frank comes from a QZ that fell, that's no more. Again, he's made it a point that he doesn't lie, and as we meet, and as we get to know him more in the episode, we know he's telling the truth, right? I wonder if that made Frank think about certain things because remember, everyone in that town was taken to a QZ. They were murdered because they couldn't fit, but that
Mhm.
QZ still fell.
Yeah.
And like Frank had the ability to, like Bill had the ability to. So I wonder, I wonder if that made Bill think like this guy's also a survivor in his own way, because not only did he get to a QZ, but he survived the falling of the QZ. I don't know, it's something. I'm reading too much into it. Let's keep going. I get all excited about these little minutiae. Um,
No, it's
now,
good. Yeah.
now the idea that I love how the basis of the relationship, right, as it starts to develop into a romantic relationship, right? I find it interesting because that's the whole thing about having a romantic partner, right? Is that that person is a person that sees you for who you are, right? And the idea that the presentation of that scene at the piano was to for that line, right? Like, so who's the girl? There is no girl. I
Sly
know.
Fox.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the idea
So
that
sly. Yeah.
yes,
The Riz on this guy, I tell you, man.
Not the
yep,
Riz.
yeah, no, but the whole thing that Bill found himself seen, right? That's like that's where you. I think that's the moment that I was convinced and I understood that this was a love story.
I
That's
it's little those little minutia, those little minute things.
The
His
little
seeing
little
through
things,
Bill's bullshit in the
right?
hole, right? By calling him out on the Arby's and all that stuff, right? Like that's one, and then two, when they were eating the meal, he's like, "Oh, you
yeah.
know how to pair." The meal with this type of wine, and then Frank or Bill's like, I know I don't look the type, and then he's like, yeah, you do, right? So that was like number two. And then the piano, absolutely number three, like, oh yeah, this is you with the Linda Ronstadt book, right?
Yep,
And yeah, it is about Bill being seen because he's such a tough cookie. He's such a tough dude. He's in the game, he's super jaded. In this one, he's jaded, he's a little grumpy, he's grouchy, he's paranoid, right? But there is a softness, like immediately once he starts playing that song, it's like Bill's, walls came down a little bit to allow him,
yes, yes,
um, to let Frank into his life. Honestly, probably after that shower, because that's where I would have been like, "What do you want to do after this?" But anyways, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing is, it's like it's the whole thing of Bill is the type of person that's been hiding part of himself forever. Where, of
Mhm.
course, Frank is the opposite. He
Mhm.
understands who he is, right? So, this idea of self discovery in Bill's side, but also Frank finding that there is someone that I can find time with, you know? So the idea that these two characters found each other, it's like, I mean, the best of love stories, all the greatest love stories starts with that. And I love how that moment was so simple. It didn't feel forced. I
Mhm.
mean, kudos to these actors. It's just so good.
So tender, yeah, so delicate, so tender. And there's a lot of that in this episode. There's a lot of delicate and tender sensuality between them in the scenes where they go have sexy time, or when they do delicate kisses on the forehead or whatever, on
Yeah.
the lips, whatever, wherever they're kissing. It comes across as such a visual performance. Like, it's almost like,
Yeah.
ooh, the camera shouldn't be here. Like, it's so intimate. It's so
Yeah.
great to like be able to, peek into their lives that way. And
Yeah.
and also, yeah, I think you hit something on the head there, is that Frank clearly is a person who survives off of his charisma, his good looks and
Yeah.
his charisma, because that's immediately what he tries to do, is try
Yep.
to manipulate the situation. Bill is a manipulator in a different sense, like in a toxic sense, right? More or less.
Yeah.
But so is
Yeah.
In a
Frank. He's a
controlling,
manipulator.
yeah, yeah.
He's controlling, yeah, exactly. And Frank is kind of there to be like, no, like, I do it this way. Like, he's kind of
Singing at
like
the
the
table, it's
soft
like, could you
way.
not?
Yeah,
like,
right.
like,
And
yeah.
there's ways that comes out, and in the way Frank wants to liven up the city, and Bill's like, what the
Yes.
fuck, or Kimiko's, what the hell, why do
Yeah.
you want to do this? And so there's
Yeah.
moments. I just love their polar opposite kind of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love Nick Offerman in this episode, because he is very much the Bill we know from the games, but he is able to have that softer side, like you were saying, right? And that the way he's able to just flip like a switch, and he's this big tough dude, and then he instantly just melts once he gets comfortable around Frank. It's just really heartwarming, and
Yeah.
just shows
Mhm.
how great of a performance that was again, because
Right.
I buy it. I buy that this gruff dude is gonna giggle like a little child when he tastes a strawberry for the first time in like God knows how long.
It's like it's that Captain Holt moment with the marshmallow.
With the marshmallows.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like nobody
Yeah.
believes that Boyle's right. Like I can see him do that, and suddenly Captain Holt, Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference, guys. He eats the
Yeah.
marshmallow and goes, like, it's magic.
Top 10 cold open.
Great.
Yes. Now, Mike, I'm going to throw you out there because you put a great note here in the notes, and I found that fascinating. It's you mentioned about how that fight, right after them coming together, we get a flash forward. By the way, this takes place 20 years prior, right? So it goes back in time again in episode 3, where we meet Bill on Outbreak Day or days after Outbreak Day. And then 4 to 3 years after living alone, that's when he finds Frank. And then we fast forward 3 years. And they've been together for 3 years and now they're fighting. But they're fighting because their worldviews are clashing. And I found interesting your note, Mike, about what if this is the reason that they actually split in the game? Because Frank wanted to live a life where he can connect with other people, and have Bill grow and connect with other people. And Bill just wanted to be, like he says in the show, like, friends. We have no friends because there
Right.
are no friends to be had. And like you were saying in the performance, Mike, is I love how we get those tender moments and those strong moments from Bill when he's with Frank. But as soon as we introduce the we introduce the factor of Joel and Tess, he's already walled up once more. So I like that consistency in the performance, um, which I found brilliant. Which, by the way, kudos to Craig and Neil for bringing Anna Torv back, even for this brief moment. We needed more tests. And I love the idea because it also gives a sense of history that Joel and Tess were together for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only do they talk about, because remember, according to what Joel talks about, is Joel and Tess got together or met when Tommy was still with Joel. So we got to figure they were together or working together or together for almost 15 years. So it adds a lot of weight to the loss of Tess, but also this particular scene and how, like, the leaders of the group of the community Like we know that the leaders of the community were Frank and Tess, not Bill and Joel. like
Definitely,
like they were the
No.
leaders
definitely
of the
not.
community. I love the whole thing of that inside Frank. Like they went to
You
talk
got.
along.
Mhm.
No, no, go
Sorry, go
ahead,
ahead.
good. No, they went to
Yeah,
talk to the
like
house, and then you got that slow moment with Joel and Bill.
right, exactly. It was so interesting because yeah, they were just gabbing. And shout out to this one particular line, because Bill has a gun at Joel,
Yeah.
more or less during the whole meal, right?
Yeah.
And that line where Frank's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot I'm with a paranoid schizophrenic," and then he says, "I'm not schizophrenic," right? So it's like that little quick zinger. But yeah, then you get those cool parallels in that meeting between the four of them is that Frank and Tess are gabbing like schoolgirls, and Frank's like, okay, like let me go show you something in the house really quick. And it leaves Joel, who's not a man of many words, and then it
Right.
leaves Bill, definitely not a man of many words, together to talk business. They don't even have any niceties to say to each other. They just kind of just jump in there and just, go for it, to talk about survival. And I think that's another parallel here is that Bill wants to survive and Frank wants to live, right? That is their dynamic. Frank is there to pull Bill out of his shell and show him there's so much more to this bleak world than just being a survivalist. And Joel
Yeah.
and Tess are not yet jaded. They're not yet the Joel and Tess that we start off the show with, but they're
Right.
on their way to becoming that. And so they're a little bit more hopeful. But Tess, at least at this time, seems to kind of be more like Frank, where she's more open and free to communicate. And she was even nicer to Ellie at some points than Joel was.
Yeah.
She was trying to tell Joel, like, Joel, calm down, right? Like, listen to her. This is real. Like this immunity that she has is real, even though she was trying to act tough.
Yeah.
So I just love that parallel having them together like that. You see more yeah, just more parallels and things to make.
Yeah.
I
Go
love
go
that
Mike.
you mentioned that they're not jaded yet, right? Like, look at the pictures we have here. They almost look happy, which just twists the knife even more, considering what happened in the last episode, in the previous episode. And it's like, yeah, things could have turned out differently if they all could have just built that community, right? That safe haven that Frank was aspiring to make. And it's devastating. And that's why this episode, on so many levels, it's a story of love. And it's a story, like, they ultimately do win. They beat the apocalypse, right? They're able to find love and find some form of happiness in this cruel world. And then you have, like you said, the parallel of these two who didn't. And we see how that's affecting Joel and his, that it just makes that note at the end even more powerful and more tear jerking as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. And I love how this episode also shows that the hope that we see, which you don't see that in the game because you don't have enough time, right?
Mhm.
The hope, the want for the want to live in Tess that we see in episode 2, right? As she talks to Ellie, as she understands that she is immune, as she tries to encourage Joel to move on and try and live and enjoy the good news, right? She's trying to infect Joel with hope, right? In episode 2. Um, this test shows that that's always been there. The test
Yeah.
that we see her here, it's always been there. There's this kind woman that has just been rattled by trying to survive, right? um, that great movement is still there. She wasn't always a test, like you mentioned, Mike, that we see that at the beginning of the series. So I love how they're showing a little bit of that there because it creates that connectivity to these characters and how it's all about how these characters become the characters that they become. It's like telling a story without telling a story. It's like telling, like, through the time, to the little time that we're spending with these characters, we're able to know this character's whole without an exposition dump, without, just by learning through them with the story, which is what great storytelling does, right? Um, I love that we already have TV show only Easter eggs. Because did you guys catch the line when as they're saying goodbye to each other after Joel, Tess, Bill, and everything meet? We get this line where Bill and Tess, Frank and Tess are having a conversation, and suddenly, as the camera shifts to Joel and Bill, of course, Bill's telling him, "We don't need you. We're self-sufficient." Blah blah. You can hear in the background Frank talking about, "I think we should have a code so whenever we're talking on the radios." So, 80s is trouble, of course, and then he keeps on going. I was like, "Holy crap, that was Frank!"
Yeah,
Yep.
because the radio thing has nothing to do with the game; it's a TV show thing. But I love how it's bringing us back there. Like
loved
in
it.
3 episodes, we already have all this connectivity and story. It's phenomenal.
It's beautiful. We got to catch up on some comments because
Go,
the
go.
chat's been going
Let's
while
do
we were
it.
talking. But first off, we got clear information regarding the Arby's thing.
Thank you for the clarification.
Just
So
so Brand is not scratching his head the rest of the night.
Sando Vizeris
Oh,
says on the chat, "There's no Arby's in Toronto. You have to go way out of town." And I mean, no one loves Arby's. That
it's
I'm
so
sorry,
true.
bro. I feel with you. I
It's so
feel with you.
true.
G
So
Techie
true.
also had a comment earlier. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's the best episode. For
G
sure.
Techie shares on the chat episode, just for those listening to it later on. Episode three's intimacy strayed a bit outside of my personal comfort zone, but it took nothing away from the narrative of two humans giving each other purpose. A masterpiece in my book. Best episode. Jeff's kiss. That comment is Jeff kiss. Jeff Goldblum, feel it. Jeff.
Jeff
um,
Kiss.
and then Kit Stone states it was probably a breath of fresh air to be there.
Yeah, for
I'm on
sure.
clean
That's
homes.
definitely contributing to their happiness in that moment.
Yeah, but then again, it's like anything. Bill provided, like, then not just for Joel and right, but going back to Bill and Frank, Bill had all the utility and all the protection, and Frank was all about the quality of life, right? And I love that conversation, that argument that they have. Like, our home is not just this; it's the street, it's everything around us, you know. Um, now,
Murray freaking Bartlett. Oh, so good. So
yes,
good. So
yes.
good.
Now, go.
Sorry, I did have one question. Arby's Sandow Visser. How far is Calgary from Toronto? Because they did film this show in Calgary. And
Interesting.
as an American, I don't know. We know some of the provinces, but I don't know the. Anyway, did you stock the set? Is what I'm asking. All right, go ahead. Continue.
Sandow Visor, let us know the worst decisions you ever made to prove how much of a fan you are of this show. Let us know all your bad decisions. Duteki on the chat shares. It went over my head that Bill and Frank were partners in the game, but it makes sense now. I just didn't catch it.
I
Well, that's
keep
the thing.
hearing that on social. What's going on? Because I don't know. It was obvious to me. If you didn't catch the note, is optional. So I'll give people that the note is optional.
Yeah.
You can bypass the note. But then you get Ellie talking about the men's magazine and why the pages are stuck afterwards. I don't know. Maybe people don't know it's a men's magazine. Anyway, go ahead. What's your guys' take on that?
Well, it's funny that you say that because it's one of those things that requires you to pay extra attention. And
Sure.
some gamers are just, oh, we're going to the next stage. Like, you have to have people that are there for the story and then play it again and go like that, because it's heavily implied, but implied is the key point here. It's never expressed as thoroughly as it is now on the show. Now, of course, any other comments we need to catch up with, Mr. Mike?
Yep, just a couple more right here.
Sanda Visor returns to the chat. I hope they do the brutality of the outside world justice, because I'm getting the hopelessness and bleakness of it all, but not so much the danger. If you saw the preview for episode 4, I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, and then Kit Stone was just making sure we were aware. She was referring to Tess and Joe.
Okay. Yes,
earlier.
Who's Tessa?
agreed.
Who's Joe? Who's Joe? Tell us who Joe is.
You know, you gotta
Um,
abbreviate and take that L off. It's
Fearless
just too
Joe
much
from
work.
Megalobox.
That's that other man that
Yeah.
Tessa's with.
No, but yeah, perfect. You're right.
We got you.
You're right. But that particular thing applies to both, right? Now let's go back to Kidstone in the chat. One running theme I love in these shows is that they're constantly doubling down on the narrative that there is no circumstance that warrants isolation. Interesting.
Human connection always wins. Yeah.
So it's funny that you say that because one of the things that Neil and Craig are constantly talking about whenever they're talking about the show, and I have to drop it. I'm sorry, you got to put it in the description. Destiny had the chance to have a conversation with Neil
Oh.
and Craig, so you may be able to, yeah, but but the whole thing is that they keep talking about how this is a love story, right? That it's all about the extremes of love, the most beautiful thing that love has to offer and the worst thing that love has to offer, right? And I love how human connection goes into that. And
Yeah.
human connection again always wins, but human connection, being connected to someone, can bring out the best in you and can also bring out the worst in you. And I love how you literally see that between Bill and Frank, right? Because Bill and Frank's relationship is one of love, it's one of sincerity, it's one about care and protection, right? But just like Bill, as a protector, was able to protect Frank and keep everyone safe, when you look, just as much as he loved and protected Frank, he had no problem killing anybody that came to the town that he didn't want in the town. Like when the Raiders invade, he's just letting them die and killing people to protect Frank, which kind of shows the duality of the love message, the duality of that human connection message, right? And
Yeah.
and I love how it continues to play out in the episode where we find out that as a protector, Bill succeeds in protecting Frank. And I love the words of how this is expressed because the idea that because of human connection, he's able to say, I was never afraid when the outbreak happened. I was never afraid before until I met you.
Mm,
With love, he came to know fear.
mm-mm.
With love, he came to know loss or the idea of loss.
Preach it.
Like there's so much there that's so beautiful and so powerful. And the idea that Bill was able to experience so much that he never knew, like it's like one of those things, like you never know what you're missing out, right? um Whether good or bad. And the idea that you get, fuck, I can't do this, you get to the point where after Bill is shot and Frank is taking care of him, right? Which again, I find it so interesting that Frank gets the opportunity to protect Bill in what little he can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that he saves Bill because we do get another flash forward. And then you have the revelation that over the years, when we reach the present day, Frank has a degenerative disease. We don't know what it is. So it's not the outbreak. Life simply happens. And the love that these two people have for each other allows them to make the best that they can out of the day, out of what life hits them with, right? And then it gets to the point where Frank says, "Don't worry, I'm not going to fall asleep in the chair." Why? Because today is my last day. Like
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
it's these are the notes, right? These are the lines. These are the things that just break your heart because it's that same heartbreaking moment from $1 Million Baby, right? Like for those that know the phenomenal movie by Clint Eastwood, right? Is that because of someone's cheap shot, the main character of that film becomes paralyzed. She
Yeah.
can no longer do what she loves. Her family wants her only for her money. The only person that she trusts is her coach, which has become her pseudo dad figure, right? And she literally asks him, I can't do this. I need you to do this for me. And she's asking to be euthanized. And it's like the idea, of course, this is a very controversial topic, right? Because they both
Yeah.
make a decision that's very controversial. But who is anyone to question the decision that someone wants to make at that point, right? At any point, you know? And and I just found that so heartbreaking, especially when it's followed by the words that Frank says. Because first off, when you see Bill for the first time in 15 years that he's been with Frank, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I found this so interesting. For the first time after he said, "This is my last day," for the first time in 15 years, Bill regresses to the same mode that he was when he first met Frank. Did you guys notice that? He's isolated, apart, and shrugged in a corner like a child. Like he
Yeah. On the
because he's
mhm.
scared, because he's paralyzed, because of what's overcoming him, because of the loss that he foresees in Frank's words. Did you guys
Yeah.
catch that? That was like one of those moments where like even when Frank goes like, oh, like when because he sees the like I can't, damn it, I'm gonna cry. It's just so
Yeah.
powerful. It's when you guys saw that, like that was the moment where you're like we've lived a life with these characters. The idea that they were able to capture us and take us it through life with these characters to this point that we're breaking as Bill breaks. We're breaking with the prepper, damn it.
Yeah. That was when the tears really came for me because the strawberry scene, I was like kind of like, oh, that's so cute. And
Not on the
then
strawberries.
not on the strawberries, okay?
Sexy time away from Betty's.
Yeah, sexy time. Yeah, don't do sexy time on the fruit, babes. It probably took a long time to grow, and I felt Frank in that moment. I was like,
Yes, yes,
I stand that
yes,
decision.
yes.
Um, but that's exactly where I broke. That's exactly where I broke because you are watching Bill have to process what his best friend, his lover, the first person to ever see him ever, tell him that he doesn't want to live anymore. And then you have to watch him process that, and then at the in the inner machinations of his mind, he probably is deciding like, well, what does my life look like without Frank in it? And then obviously we'll get into that last part, so I don't want to again jump too far ahead, but that
Yeah,
break scene, that scene where Frank tells him, and Frank even tries to be very cordial about it. He tries to soften the blow with like a couple of jokes or whatever, right? Um he tries to deliver it in kind of like his natural charismatic way or whatever, like I'm not going to go to sleep or whatever, this will be my, then he delivers the soft blow, and then he he gets honest with him for a second. He says, I've had a lot of bad days, especially with you or something, but I've had a lot of more good days than bad days, and why don't you give me one more good day? I was over. Like when he said that, like I was literally like I was so ugly. Okay.
and if that
So
wasn't enough, right? And if that wasn't
yeah.
enough, see, that's the line. I'm already crying at this point. I'm already like breaking, right?
Yeah.
But but what took it to the next level is when because Bill is just crying. He's just breaking apart. Which, by the way,
He's done.
he's done, right? Like, and then Nick and then Frank comes and says he literally goes like he sees the person that he loved like just break, right? Because he knows what he's asking of him. And then he drops the line. Let's go to the boutique. I'll pick some
Yeah.
suits for us. We'll get married. You'll make me a great dinner, and then
Mhm.
and then he goes, "Do you love me?" And then Bill is just like, "Of course." And then he goes, "Then love me the way I want you to." That that
Oh boy.
was, I
No, I'm
mean,
like tearing up
yeah,
again.
that's
Yeah.
the
All
up
over
moment.
again.
That's the up moment, right? And then you have the wordless transition. Like those moments, like the idea that I think the seriousness, the seriousness that we see Bill act beyond that point, right? That's when that's what kind of makes you go, okay, that's what made him make that choice at the end. Because here's the biggest surprise, right? Is that this is not the one where the protagonist dies at the end of the play, right? They
Right.
have all those mirror moments from the first get together. They're having laughs. Like you can see like Bill just being like, and look, it's the same wine too. Like, like when he shows up the wine and Frank just smiles. But the idea that they both chose to embrace each other and both leave. And again, it's the notebook. It's 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 that idea that they like, because world doesn't make sense anymore without Frank, and because Bill is older, it's like he's ready too. He's done what he needs to do. He was successful in protecting the one that he loved. Like, and if that was heartbreaking enough, right? We're already crying, we're already like dying inside. That's when we return to our main characters, right? And did you guys this particular? I'm glad that you chose this shot, Mike. By the way, did you guys notice the cinematography of this shot? Do you know what's the most important scene or picture in this shot?
Yeah.
The
Yeah, I chose this picture because the flowers are in frame, and you know that Joel is like, Frank would not let these
Yes.
flowers
Yep.
die, and you can just tell, like, oh
Yeah.
boy, he knows
There's so
already.
much there's so much visual storytelling because first you see the flowers, right?
Hmm.
Then you see the candles. Then you see the plates with the little bag, right?
Yep.
Like Frank would never have this house be in disarray. So Joel knows something's up, right? He knows something is not right. And I find it cruel but necessary for the story that as we see the success of love, now we see the failures of love. Because just how Bill was able to die peacefully because he protected Frank, now Joel has to deal emotionally about the fact that he failed to protect Tess. Because when he gets that letter from Bill, and like Ellie says in phenomenal Ellie fashion, which Bella Ramsey is like, it said it said whoever or probably Joel, so I figured I qualify as whoever. So she just, which I love. I love the sparkiness, the sassiness. Is just perfect, Ellie.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like that moment where they go in and Joel goes, so they're dead, right? It's interesting how when he found out that they were dead, Joel didn't really care. Like it didn't show that he cared, right? But when Ellie reads the letter, and even though Bill is doing it like in jest, right? Like, hey, we open the window so you don't smell it and stuff like that. He then goes and says, I leave you all my guns, protect, and then Ellie goes silent. And then you never see. That's what I love about the show more than anything. You get a little bit of it in part two, right? But you never see Joel deal with his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like because of how he's built, right? Emotionally, how he's built emotionally, he doesn't deal with his emotions. He deals with the problem that's bringing up his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? He's that kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't sit down and deal with what he's feeling. He's going to deal with what's causing what he's feeling,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But this moment, there's nothing to hit, there's nothing to break. So he breaks. When he walks outside, that's
Yeah.
when that happened. Like, as us, we've played the game, we've seen Joel, we know Joel, we know what happens to Joel. I've
Yeah.
never felt about Joel this way.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel when he walks away and you can see Pedro Pascal just bring all this from Joel? It's just crazy.
I think the way that this show handles Joel's vulnerabilities um, is amazing. It's an amazing layer to this game because we see that in the first episode he's still dealing with the PTSD of losing his daughter, and that causes him to act quite irrationally when he goes off on that guard. And then we still see lingerings of that pain in the second episode as well, as he tries to figure out what the hell Ellie's about, right? And then also we see that pain again as they try to make small talk at the beginning of this episode. And Ellie's has to be like, this is not my fault that Tess died, but also like he has to learn, okay, I need to calm down because it's just the two of us now, right? But then you really feel that emotion by the end of this episode, which you're getting to. So I think Joel's vulnerability here, and I don't want to say too much. I've said too much, but Joel's vulnerability is the best component of this series.
Yeah. Mike.
100% agree with everything you guys have said. Like, that's why for me, Pedro Pascal is just doing a phenomenal job, right? It's the same performance, but the nuances he's able to add with
Right.
that vulnerability, right? Like seeing the emotion on his face, like going back to the shot that I had up here before, him just looking at those flowers. Which one was it? This one right here. Yeah. Him, you can just see in this blurry still when the camera zooms in and it clears up, you can see on his face, he's just like, okay, what are we about to walk into? He's already, after everything that's happened with Tess, he's in a very vulnerable spot because while they're not the best of friends, he and Bill did understand each other. And so like that still affects him in a way. And it kind of goes back to what G Techie said a little bit ago. I was just waiting for a good chance to bring this up. The 80s song that plays, remember I asked you and Brett a couple weeks ago, what did you think that meant? Do you think that was Frank trying to get in contact with Tess one last time?
Interesting. Because this probably just happened.
Yeah.
I did see something on the internet which blew my mind, because at first I was like, you don't really know how much time has passed since Joel's arrival and their death, but then someone was like, well, because you do hear them say, Joel say, oh, he didn't set the thing back in a week. That's why the song played, right? Because Bill hadn't been able to reset it. So I was like, okay, so then the person on the internet was like, it must be a week, because that would have made the most sense. But if the week had passed when they were walking, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's like a week and some change or something like that. Maybe I don't know what the time difference would be, but so it seemed not too long, right? Because the food was still, it didn't have like necessarily maggots on it. I think it had like flies, or maybe it had maybe had little Maggies on it. I don't remember, but but yeah. So you can think like
Yeah,
maybe
like
a
you can
week
tell that little
ago.
time has passed. Like this
Yeah,
just it happened recently, right?
and it's like if they would have been just a little sooner, you know what I mean? But all the
Yeah,
events that would have happened, because it's like we don't know the last time really that Joel Artes had seen Bill and
yeah,
Frank, and that's heartbreaking to think of in itself because yeah, Joel didn't probably consider him his friend, and that's probably the first time he heard Bill say that. You know what I mean? Because Bill was
yeah,
kind of like, "Yeah, we're cool, right?" So,
Yeah.
so now Joel has to process the loss again, another loss in his life, though it
right.
wasn't like as close as the others. But
Yeah,
yeah, G Techie, I think 1 to 2 weeks would sound about right to me too.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah.
so it's just crazy. It's just crazy to think about.
So the episode comes to a close with a bunch of Easter eggs, like all the Easter eggs that you could ask for. There are a lot that happen through the
They had to
through the
make up
show.
some time because of the original story that they were telling.
Yes, um, but again, we can't say how much we love this episode. We love what's going on with these characters, with the emotions. Um, and the show and the episode ends with the rules and the beginning of the journey, right? Because remember, in the game, um, the journey starts as soon as Tess dies, right? At the end of episode two, it's all about taking Ellie to Bill and Frank. It's not about Joel taking Ellie to the Fireflies.
Mhm.
It's finally that because there is no Bill and Frank. Um, anything else on the episode before we jump into Easter eggs and go home, guys?
No, other than it was a super tight episode. I love how it started with that section started with the Linda Ronstadt song. And are we getting to the window?
Yeah, you can go
Uh-uh.
to the ending now. Yeah, let's do the ending. Yeah,
Yeah, how it started with the Linda Ronstadt song and then it ends with the Linda Ronstadt song. Um, and then on top of that, again, like what I was saying at the beginning, this peaceful Stone River shot. Now you get to this window shot as Joel and Ellie head out on their next adventure. You get this beautiful shot of the camera peering through Bill and Frank's room. It does not show their bodies. And it just
I like
pans
that it
out.
didn't. I like that.
You know, I was like, maybe we're gonna get some feet action or something, but
No, no, I like
thankfully,
that. I like that we're able that they want us to remember them for the beauty that we saw in them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Their last moments, yeah, because last we see them, they share a little kiss
yeah,
um at the
Mhm.
table, but
yeah,
exactly. I love how peaceful because the camera's kind of like lingering. It lingers on these flowers, it lingers on the foliage, it lingers on the blue sky and all these things. And you get this last sweeping, beautiful pan over to the window. The wind is rustling.
yeah.
And side note too, the wind also shuts the door behind Joel and Ellie when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
So to me, it felt spiritual. It felt like this shot throughout the window with the wind and looking at Joel and Ellie drive away from Bill and Frank's bedroom perspective. It feels like a peaceful, like we're watching you, we're seeing you leave, we're giving you our blessing, like good luck.
Yeah.
Right. It felt so strongly to me, and I just
Yeah.
cried more. But there's something about that lingering window shot that was just so touching, making me think
And
like, oh, they're still there in this house.
what a what a great you got anything on the window shot, Mike, before I jump in?
Go for it.
And what a great segue to go into Easter eggs, right? Because those that have played the game is that know that The Last of Us Part One, the title screen is a windowsill. It's it's a con is a contrast heavy image because you have the beauty of nature overcoming an actual physical building, the beauty of the sunlight, the shadowing and stuff like that. But at the same time, but at the same time, there's evidence of destruction, of decay, of loss. and is that dual imagery and the idea that someone's looking from destruction and something's looking from the light. So you have that contrasting image, right? Which again, that what a great way to start the Easter egg conversation, right? So I'm just gonna go through the list, and I just want to know what you guys thought were the best Easter eggs or the most interesting ones. You guys ready?
Hit me.
I think so. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go in order as I remembered them. The first thing to me was, did y'all catch the my Mortal Kombat 2 arcade cabinet?
No.
So when they go to this like gas station or pharmacy or whatever it is, um, where Joel is kind of looking for his private stash that's hidden somewhere, Ellie has a
Mm.
moment where she finds an Mortal Kombat 2 arcade cabinet, and she talks about how she used to play this with a friend,
Oh,
which
that's right.
those that know, by the way, if you haven't played the game, this is where you should probably step out. If not, hang out with us. Um, but
Bringing it back.
I would just put The Last of Us, period. Um, but she talks about how she played with a friend. We all know who that friend is. But in the game, as you're exploring Bill's town, you go to a pizza place that's broken down, and there is an arcade cabinet for a game called The Turning, which is the game that you play with Riley in Left Behind. So that's a phenomenal Easter egg from the game. Um, Another great Easter egg is Bill's town. All the traps and all that stuff is a great Easter egg. Um, I love the idea of Joel and Bill having a pre-existing relationship that was always rocky. I love how that was very clear there. Um, and also, oh,
Yes.
yes.
Don't forget the workbench in the
D
bunker.
Techie in the comments. Don't forget the workbench in the bunker. Yes. So it's funny that you say that, because taking that segue from G Techie, did you catch that Joel building the battery is an allude to crafting?
I didn't realize he was building the battery until like literally I watched it again last night. That's probably like my fifth watch. So I didn't even realize
20 cries
uh
later.
yeah, like yeah, exactly like in the SpongeBob French voice. 20 hours later. I didn't even realize, like, okay, Nick or Bill was so thoughtful, one, to close the door so no one could smell or see their bodies, their decomposing bodies. Then two, he left the battery parts, so it wouldn't like corrode, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
so he could
yeah,
build it so it wouldn't age.
yeah.
That shit's awesome. But anyways, no, I didn't notice that till last
Yeah,
night.
it's an allude at you picking up objects and crafting. And by the way, this is the first time that we see them. This episode is the first time that we see them doing what you do in the game, which is looking for supplies everywhere and finding what we can do and forage whatever we can, which is a very common thing in gameplay. Ellie's gun, which interesting note the from the HBO podcast, according to the creators, Ellie's gun, apart from the fact the line that it's more her size, she gets a gun, the same gun that she has in the game, that same type of gun, small gun. According to them, that was Frank's gun. So the idea that they're mirroring Bill, Frank, Joel, Ellie, it was phenomenal. Um,
It reminds me of the line when he was talking to Ted. Well, he was talking to Bill. Frank was, and he was like, "I traded one of your guns for the strawberry seeds." And he's like, "Which one?" "The little ones." And it's like, of course, that's why it's a small
yes,
pistol for Ellie, because
yes,
I guess those are the ones that he favors, which is cute.
yeah. Um, Joel. So and also one of the greatest cool one is the clothes. They did the thing. They're wearing the clothes that Joel wear in the cover of The Last of Us. Joel has the shirt. Ellie has the shirt. So they're doing all the things, like they're making every gamer happy. And the last big, which I didn't know till I heard the podcast, and I was surprised by, the truck in the game, the truck in the show is the same truck in the game.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same freaking truck.
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome.
Hmm.
So good. So good.
The nerdy
Um,
details you find always astound me.
so guys, before if there's any other Easter eggs that you guys think that we missed, please let us know in the comments section
Yep.
below. Ellie's iconic shirt, yes, she got from Bill's house, yes,
Yeah.
and I hope we see more stuff that she got from Bill's house in the next episode. So I can't wait for road trip junkie Ellie. Oh, and by the way, did you guys notice that they're setting the seeds for a very interesting thing in part two? Is that in part two we find out that Ellie has always been obsessed with space. They're setting the seeds here. You were in the sky, and also, oh wow, it's like a spaceship when she talks about the car. So little things like that, and of course the rules. Another great thing, which G Techie just mentioned, um, the what the rules. You don't mention tests ever. Never tell anyone about your condition. You do what I say when I say it. What you say goes. That's all I got, guys. You guys got anything else?
I think we're good.
No. Other than
Got
yeah, they told us how the cordyceps happened, which I thought was cool.
yeah.
At the beginning, like through the flour and grain and stuff. That was nice.
Oh, pancake mix. When he said pancake mix, that broke my heart. That
Yeah.
was again. Let's go back to cry and suffer.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't
But
Destiny.
have
that's it.
pancakes that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Destiny. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Beyond the Clickers.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Awesome. Awesome. If people wanted to find your written work or find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm primarily on Twitter. So that's good enough. My work, you can find me I work at Deadline, so I'm a journalist over at Deadline, so you can go to deadline.com. Or I have a website, destinydelights.com, which is the opposite of my Twitter handle, which is right there, Destiny Dreadful.
Nice.
I'm a huge Penny Dreadful fan, and I also like alliteration. So it works, and then I tweet too much. So it's really a combo of all. I'm Craig Mazin, is what I'm saying. I'm very
Yes.
layered.
Yes.
So those are the places you can find me.
Yes. Guys, for those in the chat, thank you for joining us for this awesome episode of Beyond the Clickers. We go live every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. when we can, Eastern Standard Time, and we talk The Last of Us. We can't wait to get to the Hunter's arc that will be introduced in next week's episode. We're going to meet a lot of great, crazy characters, some brand new and some from the game. I am very excited for this. And we will watch it on Sunday, and we will definitely talk back on Tuesday. And Brett will be back, and we'll ask him his thoughts on episode 3 and jump into episode 4. Guys, stay awesome. And like the great Savage Starlight would say, endure and survive.
Survive.
Peace.